JMK, that she take nobody like she. JMK, that she take nobody like she. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. JMK, that she take nobody like she. JMK, that she take nobody like she. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. JMK, that she rocks her body with high. JMK, that she rocks her body with high. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. JMK, that she walk up in liquid style. JMK, that she walk up in liquid style. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. JMK, now them village fire run wild. JMK.
Hi, good evening all. My name is Sharma Solomon. I'll be your host this evening for this program, Straight Up, coming to you from 107.1 Benchcop Radio. This evening, I am expected to be joined by Ms. Vanessa Kissoon, former Member of Parliament and also contender for the presidency of the GTU, the Guyana Teachers Union. But before we get into this evening's program, let me apologize for Mark to not being your host this evening and bringing you the program that you're so accustomed to. I know that from time to time he may call to ask for me to lend support in terms of filling in for him. So this evening, I hope that I can take this opportunity to bring to you not only some issues in the news, but some very important matters that as Guyanese, home and abroad, that I think it is very important that we are brought up to date so that we can continue to participate in this grand scheme of building this one people, one nation, one destiny of this beautiful cooperative republic that we call Guyana. So again, let me apologize for Mark not being here. He is with some very professional duties that called on him very urgently. So I hope that he is going to be okay to take care of those. I wish him well also. And just before we get going again, let me take this time to recognize the festive season, if we call it that. In fact, not festive, but the holiday season that we're in. I know people make grand festivities of this moment and what we're indulged in at this moment. But let me take the time to extend to our Christian brothers and sisters warmest of greetings to you as you embark on this holiday season. You would have had your Holy Thursday to celebrate and recognize and commemorate your Good Friday, and then you have Easter Sunday. And I know that in the religious symbolic understanding of what Easter represents, I hope that we recognize that message in sacrifice and what it means to give of oneself for the good and greater benefit of all. I embrace that message dearly. I believe that Jesus Christ indeed is with the message of hope, change. As a Muslim myself, we believe that Jesus Christ came, brought the message of the gospel, and we adhere to that particular sort of teachings from Jesus Christ. So to my Christian brothers and sisters, again, uh, I I want you to know that we all recognize the importance of what this season means to you all. And to my Muslim brothers and sisters, let me recognize tomorrow is Juma in the holy month of Ramadan. And we are almost at the midway point of the holy month. And I hope that our intentions as we make them as sincere as we hope that we can perform our duties in fasting and praying are accepted by Almighty Allah. So again, I know this is and even to our Hindu brothers and sisters, they have their very seasoned program in this particular time of the year also. So this is a very uh, holy period. It is a very reflective period within the major religious uh, organizations and religious bodies across Guyana. So I want to also encourage us all as we uh, look towards our own individual religious programs that we also embrace that our brothers and sisters in humanity, not necessarily in faith, but in humanity, are also having their moment to indulge in recognizing greater than ourselves. So, again, let me say that for this season, we hope that each and every Guyanese can uh, understand what it means to have that sort of recognition of each other's faith. And I think in the state sense of things, it goes to show the sort of tolerance that as a nation we should have for each other in recognizing our individual faiths. So again, pleasant good evening to you all. I hope that before we conclude this evening program, that we have the guest, Ms. Vanessa Kissoon. I want to hear from her, and I hope that she can share with us all how she believed the campaign for her went. Today is the final day for voting in the GTU elections for the position of president and general secretary. I know both herself and Ms. Coretta McDonald, they are vying for those two positions, respectively, president and general secretary. And I want her to give us an idea as to just how she feels at the close of play in this campaign for the presidency, and if she is with any concerns about the outcome, or if what her confidence level is like. We hope to share that with you this evening. So um, she's not on with us as yet, so we'll probably put that to the bottom of the program. But before we get into those aspects, let me just give you an idea as to some of the areas. And again, Mark just called. He said, Sharma, just what can you do this evening to help me bring this program to the general public? And I said to him, listen, I believe, like every Guyanese, I hope too, in terms of advocacy, that we take our advocacy to the point where we can speak about it. You know, there's so many things that are wrong within our society that I think we have moved past the point of feeling sad about things, about feeling emotionally disturbed only to the point of keeping it to ourselves. And I think we've moved to that point of advocacy where we have to now speak about things. So I am always at that point where I am prepared to speak out. I hope that we are all going to be at that point because of the sort of issues within our society. So called upon, I will be an advocate to share on some of these matters. And one of the first things I want to speak about is the issue of what we see as a society, how we are treating our women. And I'll take that into the perspectives of the crime situation what we see as the sort of criminal treatment towards women, Guyanese women in all facets. Um, it is so disturbing. And then beyond the issue of crime and the criminal treatment of women, what sort of policies as a state do we see present that brings that sort of protection and ensure that one of the most vulnerable groups in our society, our women and girl children, feel safe, that the state and society have not forgotten about them. And I'm certain it is terrifying sometimes when you see the news. I am certain as a woman, I cannot become, but as a father of two girl children, I can only sympathize with so many women. Over this past week, several murders, and including the way we see the abuse. I remember, and we are speaking within the criminal context of how our society is in its treatment towards our women folk. Um, Only the statistics from last year show that women, in terms of abuse, and these are reported cases, measured almost 1,500 reported cases. So you can imagine the sort of courage it takes for a woman to want to expose that sort of abuse, and the amount of quiet cases that we are unaware of. So I think many times we overlook the importance of these conversations until we see the sort of systemic and, in fact, in a very sociological way, the social imagination of things where there is a pattern of behavior, then we speak about it. But outside of those reported cases, there are many cases that go unreported and even unrepresented, and insofar unnoticed in our society. And I believe it is in that context that we must continue to speak without only seeing the news about what we know in terms of violence against women. I, 12 years ago, as a young advocate, again, I speak of being an advocate, started out my activism in speaking out against atrocities towards women. In fact, I served as the vice chairman of the Region 10 Domestic Violence Committee. And I remember we had organized a program with the Football Association where we called it Man Up, Be a Champion for Change. And we had about 300 young men who we were for 6 weeks using what we call the Gender Equality Scale, the GEM scale, to measure their perception as to how they see our women folk in society. And in drawing from that scale, we then imply some tactics and mechanisms in a very scientific way to see if we could change perception and then reevaluate those young men. And I can tell you this, it was very surprising, and this was 11 years, 12 years ago, of the first perception index that we got in terms of the mentality of our young men as to how they believe they should treat our young women and in general women as a whole. And in the employment of the GEM scale, we were able to bring that perception down by 20%. So I want us to understand that many times we take for granted, we see an incident and it appears as though it's a grieving family in isolation without appreciating the wider context, the very violent society that we are living in terms of how we are raising our children and raising within the system. So when we look at the issue of crime, and I must extend my thoughts and prayers to the young teacher, to the 61-year-old woman who was murdered in her sleep. Her family and friends, my thoughts and prayers are with them. And even crime in terms of how we see women and their role. One must accept, outside of the very violent behavior towards women, there is a natural acceptance of how we treat in terms of trafficking of women. You know, you hear loosely in our society, oh, there is a Spanish and there is a this and there is a that. And it's accepted without recognizing that some of these women are being trafficked, that some of these women are used against their own will to perpetrate some of the things that they do. So when you look at the level of the perception of not only how women are treated and the violence meted out to them, but in terms of the acceptance of that treatment, I believe as a society we have to do a lot of introspection, you know, and we should not help but continue to have such conversation about violence in our society, in particular, violence towards our women and girl children. So I just wanted to make that very clear point about crime and the issue within our society. But we just can't talk about what we see and what we know. The question then becomes, what do we do about it? And this is where I come to the issue of policies and the sort of environment that at the level of policy making that would encourage the situation. So what do you see as policies? In fact, what you see as policymakers right now doesn't speak well to support the issue of how women are treated. You know, we heard about a young policewoman being abused, and reluctantly, policymakers are not even speaking out on this. A young woman was battered by her father, and you know, it is as if those things are acceptable and should be treated in terms of how it was reported at the station. So it was repeated abuse and abuse before action was taken. So this is where policy becomes important. What do you see even at the level of government? As we discussed a few nights ago, the Minister of Local Government is saying to a woman in Parliament about she needs a dildo. So it starts at that level. It starts at the level of our policy makers and how they view women in society, and even women within the structure of policy making, how selective some can be in terms of how we see and accept treatment towards women. So that is the first principle of dealing with this at the level of policy. The policy makers themselves must be willing to appreciate that they have to recognize they have to do better in terms of their treatment towards women folk, and that translates forward into society as an encouragement. But again, how do we address that in terms of structured policy? And this goes straight to the legislature. And what do you see coming out of institutions such as the Ministry of Social Protection? And what sort of programs are there in terms of empowerment? And we go straight to the budget and how much money was provided so that women can feel empowered. Women can feel that if they want to leave a relationship of abuse, they can, because they can have this sort of employment opportunity to provide for themselves and children. And what is in the budget? You have two programs in the budget that doesn't allow for women to be lifted out of those situations. One recognizes, I believe, $40 million, and the other one is small grant that recognizes just about $20 million. Now, how do you see a $500 billion budget catering for programs, recognizing that you have a vulnerable group in our society, just like you may have a vulnerable group such as the elderly, women classify as that. More so in a very patriarchal structure of how we see our society constructed. And you're not catering for programs to meaningfully ensure that women are provided for so that when they feel threatened or abused, that they can be independent enough to go about in a different direction. So these are some of the things that becomes conversation and should be encouraged as part of the conversation. So not just what we see in the news, the horror stories and the criminality towards women in the news, but how do we ensure that first policymakers are held accountable to ensure that they are examples in themselves, in their performance of their duties towards women first, and then the sort of policies that they are structuring within the ministries to ensure that women have direction, whether it's training, and not just any type of training, but sufficient training that many of the women who, especially in the interland communities, that probably leave school at an early age, high school or primary school, could be trained to ensure that they can find different employment if they feel threatened in a home. Because when you look at the statistics, and like I said, I am speaking on this matter because it is the first principle of my activism. It is where I started speaking on issues nationally as a young man, being part of the Region 10 Domestic Violence Committee. I have always looked at statistics on these matters, and more so now becoming a father of two girl children, I really appreciate even more that as a society, we can do far better for women and girl children. And I don't think it only required me to have that, but I believe once you have that, it speaks a little different to who you are. But that is what I really wanted to make this point this evening, that on the first principle, we should have this conversation. We should not take it out of our deliberations. And we should ensure on the second principle that the sort of policies that are in place to ensure our women are taken care of is one that we understand that we are the ones that have to shape those policies and not leave them up to policymakers so that they can take a 500 billion budget and not understand that it must cater for the most vulnerable groups in our society and not the rich elites only. But again, I really wanted to make that point. I wanted to ensure that of all the issues we see in the news, and this straight up is really a cold cut political programs at time. I know Mark run the program, but I still believe politics is involved in that as much as we have to carry on this conversation. And I hope we do. I mentioned earlier about how we treat some of how the acceptance of the treatment of women is allowed in our society. And that goes to, we hear popular songs about it. And I know life imitates art, and art imitates life sometimes. So we sing about these Spanish and the Brazilians and things like that. But it goes to the core of our immigration acceptance. And that is the area that I want to focus on second in this program this evening. I really want us to focus on immigration in terms of how it is that we are welcoming immigrants into our country and the sort of social adjustments that as a nation that we will have to make, and how policies are providing for us to catch up to those transitions that we are going through as a nation in terms of immigration. And I'll go to the president's point a few weeks ago when he was asked about this particular issue at a forum in terms of where we see immigration. And as far as he reported, is that we have specialists that are going to be looking at the issue to make recommendations as to how we proceed with a very holistic immigration policy. I'll say this by now, if 2 years on, we have not taken the issue of immigration seriously in a very holistic way, it brings a few factors before us. One, the way we treat our Asian, Caribbean brothers and sisters, that will take us before the human rights court because we are violating the rights of some of the citizens with CARICOM nationals and CARICOM passport. And we know why this government is doing that, as opposed to how we see the acceptance of the Venezuelans and even Brazilians, and not for the purpose of anything else about national development and national building. But many times, again, we go back to how the treatment of women. Many women are trafficked. The sort of environment within which some of these migrants are coming into Guyana, we saw what occurred in Region 1, where people were literally ravaging through garbage bins and into communities and all sort of things that this government is now saying they are going to now see a holistic approach 2 years on in terms of immigration and immigration policy. So not only that we are violating the rights of citizens with our immigration policy, but we are likely to end up on the tier watch list, which is the issue about trafficking in women watch list, because again of our very disjointed immigration policy. And now we are welcoming some of these people from different countries because of issues within those countries, such as Venezuela, where you have social disturbance that have pushed people into bordering nations such as Guyana. So I think to even not have that sort of consideration in itself says how far behind the government is in dealing with this matter at a policy level, but beyond the policy dealing with this matter, how it's accepted because it probably fits into a few agendas. And let me come to one of those very important agenda in terms of immigration. We see what is happening with the ID cards. Very important agenda if we don't have a proper holistic immigration policy by now. That people are coming in, there is no background check, there is no proper registrar involvement in how new ID cards are acquired and how new ID cards are being distributed. We saw the issue of what is happening with the postmaster. People are being accused of corruption. People are being accused of not having the sort of competency to run those agencies. Now, as I said before, in a very disjointed immigration policy and thousands of people coming across our border, what you're now having is the acceptance of a government to say it is okay to see the treatment of Caribbean nationals because they're Afro, as opposed to the acceptance of persons that they can then socially engineer into communities to build constituencies, give them ID cards, and then at election time, you see a certain, and this is going to be practiced at a local government. And I say this because I remember as chairman of Region 10, we had an incident in the Berbice River area where a logging company brought a number of Chinese into our community, and it almost created a separate constituency within the 6 neighborhood democratic constituencies of Kokwani to give it a 7. Because once you have a certain population number and they have ID cards, then you have to give them the space and boundary lines that they can form their own constituency. That is exactly what is happening in terms of a disjointed immigration policy that the president accepts. They are now putting in place to encourage the sort of migration of or the inflow of migrants that we can give ID cards and socially engineer communities as far as Region 1 and those bordering communities. The people are now in their thousands coming to Guyana. So I think that is very, very important, that we should not lose sight of what is happening. And the government, Parliament is back in session, and we'll come to some of the issues in Parliament shortly, is saying to us that several bills are going to be put before Parliament, and we see what this government, and we'll come to Parliament, parliamentary democracy means to this government in how they ram bills, and one could only see with the Natural Resource Fund bill being now placed before the courts because of such behavior of lack of parliamentary democracy by this government. So you're going to see several pieces of legislation that in the dealings of not only where the immigration policy is going to allow for, if not gerrymandering, a sort of social engineering for a certain electoral outcome, you're going to see bills now before the Parliament that is going to take action against GCOM, that's going to take action against boundary lines as outlined by the Attorney General in Region 4 to split Region 4 up into 3, so that now you're going to gerrymander and provide resources separate for people in different strongholds. Those are the things that are going to be coming as bills in this upcoming Parliament. So I want to know, outside of speaking about immigration and how important it is, take that also as we are now becoming an emerging economy. And I see now we have Ms. Kissoon with us. So we'll get into the issue of the union before we speak about the issue of Parliament. I know we'll get to the sort of happenings in Parliament. But let me just finish the point on immigration and where the government, in terms of these bills, not understanding how we're going to see this issue of no immigration policy play into getting people registered to vote and form different constituency that allows for social engineering, but also bills before Parliament that will interfere with GCOM, and to also not only interfere with GCOM, but to allow for different boundary lines, for example, in places like Region 4. So very important in terms of how we see this government agenda with our immigration policy. And let me take this at a foreign policy position. It is dangerous what the government is doing, very dangerous. To have unaccounted, and most time, if not unaccounted, we're playing a dangerous game without filtering, without understanding how you're going to provide social services for migrants. And more than that, you're creating communities that in the event we have issues with Venezuela, we see it happening around the world. What stops Venezuelans if they feel aggrieved to call on the government of Venezuela to protect them in Guyana while on those bordering communities. This is the reason we had national service to begin with. One of the pillars of national service was to populate the interland with recruits, with new people who would go out and see what Guyana interland has to offer, and people would want to stay there. Many people did. So instead of doing those holistic sort of development and what we see down the road, you now have people coming into Guyana unaccounted only so that they can socially engineer an electoral outcome. But we'll see what happens in Parliament. I know Parliament is back in session. I know we have two new parliamentarians in Mr. Aubrey Norton and Ms. Valda Ann Lawrence. Mr. Norton was elected as the new opposition leader. I want to publicly congratulate both Aubrey Norton and Valda Lawrence. I had extended to them privately my congratulations and expressed to them also that by the grace of Almighty God, may they serve our nation well. I think that should become what we all look forward to so that we can ensure the issue of accountability, as we've identified in some of the issues earlier tonight in policies for women, in immigration and immigration policies, that those issues and many more could be held in terms of us, the Guyanese people, having that sort of representation in Parliament. So I wish them well. I look forward to seeing the very fruitful and healthy debates and ensure that we as Guyanese can pay very careful attention. I'll ask Ms. Kissoon if she can come in here. I will speak on some union issues just now, but I know herself as a former member of Parliament and also as PNC member. You've recently gotten back your membership. If you mind sharing some thoughts on what we see as developments, not only in the party, but the party in its performance at Parliament.
Okay, first of all, let me say thank you very much for having me on, Mr. Solomon, and also to Mark, to your listening and viewing audience. I want to join with you we're in the Easter season, and as a woman of God, and I want to extend happy Easter. And tomorrow it's our Good Friday. Tomorrow is church for me. And to all my Christian brothers and sisters, I want to say happy Easter, and let's remember Christ at this time. Tomorrow we will be celebrating the death and then the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I also want to join with you in extending congratulations to the PNCR leader and leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, Comrade Norton, and also to Comrade Valda Lawrence, former minister and chair of the NCW PNCR. Congratulations. And as you know, I sat in Parliament, both Mr. Norton and Ms. Lawrence. And I want to say that I'm looking to see the type of representation that we used to have, more questions coming from our opposition MPs, and even if we can have some motions coming. I know that what the PPP gives in Parliament, especially when they have the majority, it's as if they don't care, but you still have to do what you have to do. And in order to get answers when we're dealing with the PPP, I know some people like to say, oh, you shouldn't do this, but we know what the PPP responds to. And if we as a people are going to continue to sit back and sit down and allow all these things that are happening to happen and bills to pass without us on the ground getting out there, then I'm going to say to you, they're going to continue to do what they're doing. They're going to continue to believe that they can ride us. I use the term ride us, and I want to call on my Guyanese people. It is time. I always say this when I'm on Mark's show. And I know that I'm very passionate, Mr. Solomon. You're very articulate in how you go about saying your, putting over your views. But I'm very passionate because it hurts me when I see what is being happening or what is being done to our people and, to Guyanese on the whole. I was listening to you, in fact, coming on the East Bank, the traffic, and that's what had me caught up, being so late on the program. But when we look and to see what is happening to our women, most vulnerable in society, women and girls, 19 years old, 61 years old, and we're here, police officer female being spat on, and we're not out there. Listen, if we don't put a stop to this now, then we will not be able to put a stop to it ever. And it will become a norm for us. It is becoming a norm for us. And I want to extend deepest condolences to those families of those women. I could only imagine how they feel. As a mother, as a woman, I've not only witnessed abuse, I've been there also. But I want to encourage our women tonight, Mr. Solomon, to speak out and to seek help. And just last night in class, we were talking about this to encourage women that when these things happen, it starts sometimes with just a slap, and then it comes to I'm sorry. And then you go to the courts and you beg the magistrate, or you beg the court to just warn the gentleman, and that is what men prey on, because they believe that you're going to continue. When you accept the first slap or the first punch or the first insult or the first hit, that is what opens the door. And I want to encourage our women. And I heard you talk about the programs and the little bit, that was allocated. And so these are some of the things that we have to advocate for, because it's not easy for some women not knowing where they're going to go, their source of income when they leave. Lots of times, relationships with children. But I want to say to our women out there that if we remain, our children will still not be good, because at the end of the day, they will witness the abuse that is being done. And so we will produce hurt, bruised, battered, and damaged young people into our society. So I want to say tonight that encourage our mothers, encourage our women. And there's a trend, Mr. Solomon, when a young girl, sometimes, as when we're young, we do all sorts of things. We make mistakes and we make decisions that might not always be in the best of our interests and go against our parents and so. But when parents, I want to say, even if your daughter decides to leave home and, didn't listen to you and they're in an abusive relationship, don't leave them there. They made a mistake. We have to reach out for them. Some mothers will say, oh, well, how she makes your bed, so she got to lie on it. And we leave them in those abusive relationships. And many times they're afraid to speak out and even afraid to go to family for help because of the way they're being treated when they are being abused. I know
I
I
like
said a
that.
lot.
No, but I like that. You see, I said that earlier about keeping the conversation alive, because if we don't keep the conversation alive, God forbid we end up with many more dead individuals. So it is quite understood for you to want to continue the conversation. I place it in the context of Parliament again, because policies are important. I know the AFC asked for the removal through the women's arm of the AFC of Darmlal, and there was absolutely no response. So that's why I'm saying it is the policy level that can also encourage a sort of cultural acceptance of such behavior within our society. So we come to Parliament again. As we saw earlier today, the government make an amendment to the Public Accounts Committee, for the most frivolous reason of what becomes a quorum. So if they feel lazy not to go to Parliament, go to the committee meetings, then no committee meetings for oversight is going to be held. And that is what I spoke about earlier in terms of parliamentary democracy. There is none. So I hope that now that we see some adjustments in Parliament, and you're making the point about the persons who were sworn in yesterday in the new opposition leader, Aubrey Norton and Valde Lawrence, that we hope to see a little more aggression. Because the PPP only
Yes.
after that swearing in showed that they have no intention for oversight over one of the most important committees in Parliament, which is the
Yeah.
Public Accounts Committee. So again, I see what you're
And
saying about, yes. You want
no,
to,
I
oh,
wanted to say also, Mr. Solomon, like I said earlier, if we as a people also sit back and allow them to continue, sometimes you have to take the reign. If you notice your leaders are not doing it, then we will have to do it. So it means that Ms. Kissoon may have to come out and bring out the women. We will have to. It has to start somewhere, because listen, we know the PPP, and that's it sometimes it boggles my mind. I don't know that people believe when the PPP returned to office that they would have been different. They will come 7 times worse,
and
because
we and
they might look
and we see it in terms of how they are providing in a cost of living environment. You had the Minister of Labor saying
exactly.
that, don't speak about bread and butter issue in terms of salary increase. You see the treatment with public servants in providence of just 3.5%. You see as cost of living go up tremendous, the IRI, I mean, people might take it with a pinch of salt, is saying that in over 20% of Guyanese literally cannot feed themselves when the day comes. This is an Irish
Exactly.
economy. This is one of the fastest growing economy in the world, where many Keynesian economists say growth equals development. We are still not seeing
Development.
development in terms of people being lifted out of poverty. So I see what you're saying. Where Parliament is, where we need to see that aggression, but where we need to see people understanding the circumstances in which they live and move to take the necessary action. But we come to you now. We come to you, and we know that as we wind the program down, uh, you've put your place your hat in the ring, not by yourself, but through nomination and nominations by your colleagues to
Yes.
be the new GTU president. First, can you say what the campaign was like and where it is that you want in terms of seeing the process as it ends for Saturday?
Okay, well, the actual process closes off tomorrow, and on Saturday we'll have the counting. But let me say that being on the ground during the campaign, one of the things that I recognize and realize is that there are lots of things that, yes, we're all teachers, but because of over the years, teachers felt, they were not represented, especially since the most recently with boots on the ground. A lot of teachers are really, really turned off. Um, I would not sit here to say that all teachers went out and vote, because I know there are some teachers who were very, very frustrated and fed up of the system, and what happened and what took place. But I believe one of the things that we have to do is to bring that love for the union back, to bring back that camaraderie, to have our, to represent our teachers. I know, and I must say, and I want to say tonight, I know Miss McDonald has been doing an excellent job, in advocating, even especially during the when we had the last protest actions and so on. But we need to see more involvement. I think teachers need more to be more aware of what is the role of the GTU, the role of the executive members. And I would really want to see the new executive. And by the grace of Almighty God, once I'm elected and to become the new president, that we go on the ground and we meet, because Mr. Solomon, you and I know, coming out of political office, we know what worked, and it was always being able to be on the ground and to connect with the people. And in this context, it will be connecting with the teachers, I know that, of course, there's so many things that we want to see improvement in areas, high cost of living. So the first thing on the table teachers are talking about is increased salaries. We see that 7%, and this is it,
But we
we
know the
have another
government doesn't
sector.
care about public servants. So, you got your work cut out for you.
But Mr. Solomon, public servants need to care about themselves, because if you look to see when the sugar workers got out there and they stuck together, they were rewarded because they did what they had to do, and they got the attention and the reward that they sought. All right. And this is the type of thing that we have to understand. There are times when we have to go out there, boots on the ground, and we don't just call boots on the ground off, and we don't just back down. We have to make some sacrifices, and we have to hold the government and those in authority accountable. And so we have to understand that there are times when we will have to do that. You and I know about that in 2012. We know what it took. It wasn't an easy road, but we walked that road, and what did we do? We represented the people. What did we do? We stand with the people. We stood with the people. We stood up for the people of our constituency that we represented. You understand? We worked for them. We worked with them. You see, and that is one of the things we know. We have to keep that connection. And that is why we have to be on the ground. You have to visit the different areas. I remember during my campaign, lots of teachers were saying, wow, we like this. We like the fact that you guys are coming out and you're meeting with us, and you're talking with us, and you're letting us know. And they were given the chance to express themselves and ask questions, and what they would like to see. And so that is how we were able to build and put our proposals forward. So it's not just what was coming from Ms. Kissoon or any other member, but it was coming from teachers on the whole. So, but at the close of play, I want to say to my colleagues, thank you very much for expressing the confidence in me. And our motto is, Mr. Solomon, we never lose. Either we win or we learn. And I want to say that this is a learning experience to me. Of course, there are some things that you have to not say aloud, especially at this time. But let's watch the process on Saturday. And by the grace of Almighty God, I claim victory, because, we have to claim it if we want to receive it. I see the time is going, and I'm always mixed up with, I don't want lemon.
We'll take 10 minutes more, because I think it's important we want to get
an
understanding.
I didn't want Lennon. I didn't want Lennon to, signal you.
No, Lennon was given strict instructions from Mark to allow us to be able to get to the people. One of the things I want to bring very clearly is the state of trade unionism. And I think you are going up for a particular position within the trade union that is now seeing new young leadership, and it should not be taken for granted in how labor is treated in Guyana at this moment, in terms of what is for salary increases, what goes for treatment. We're coming out of a pandemic, and the hardest hit class of workers are those public servants, in how they were placed to adjust for, whether it's nurses, whether it's teachers, they were on the front line. So it is important for us to appreciate how this government sees the issue of treatment towards labor. And we see the different sectors, even as it relates to the budgetary allocation, is treated better than those within the public sector, and how labor in general is treated. And that is made even clearer by the Minister of Labor himself, when he made that very ridiculous statement that trade unions are in essence antiquated, because all they can talk about is salary increases. How do you deal with elected? Or how do you deal with that sort of mentality and behavior of the policies of this government towards labor? How do you see that? I know you spoke about keeping all options on the table, but you must see this as a challenge.
Well, Mr. Solomon, you know that we would have known about collective bargaining, and outside of having boots on the ground and being out there, we also have to be able to sit with all stakeholders and craft these policies that we would want to see within the trade unions, within the GTU. And so I am prepared to work with all stakeholders, which includes the ministers and whoever else, other trade unions, to ensure that we work together. Because when you work together in unity, it's strength. And once all the unions can come together and we can have one vision and we can have one path, then we will have results. But when you have one person going here and the other one going, go ahead.
Good. So
you wanted to say something?
No, I like that you're working to get stakeholdership, to get, as we put it, consultative, inclusionary, participatory style of engagement. But I want to bring in, I see we can have Ms. McDonald, who is going up for the General Secretary. Lemon is trying to get her on. I hope that we can bring her on now so that she can give us, she's going to be on shortly, but when she comes on, I want her to explain to us some of the issues that they were confronted with and how that sort of internal, not having the sort of internal synergy is going to make it difficult for you to contend with the sort of opponent that you see in a government that is unwilling to recognize and respect labor. But you can share some of that.
Well, one of the things I like I said, our most recent boots on the ground, when that happened, I think that raised a lot of concerns for teachers and for the entire GTU body, which means it showed us that somewhere along the line, something wasn't meshing up. And when boots on the ground was called off, it was not a decision, and Ms. McDonald will be able to expand on this, that was made collectively by the executive of the Guyana Teachers Union. All right? And so this is where you will have, when we have persons on the executive and we cannot have one vision, we cannot have one goal, and we have their split decision, especially at a critical time like that. This is where you'll find some of what what is being proposed or put forward. We will have, I don't know if the correct term will be, confusion in our house.
Well, I like that. So you're speaking to the sort of politics that somebody like myself, I really like hearing consultative style politics. I know that is a challenge for many of the representatives within the working class in our society, in terms of having their leadership be engaged with them constantly, to update them, to aggregate their interests, and to articulate to them areas of solution and how they can find a path out of the sort of situation that they're in. But we see in the minister, that is the subject minister, and I hope that we can have Ms. McDonald on shortly, because she is the shadow to the subject minister in Parliament. But once elected itself, will have this minister who seems to be more caught up with not the most important things that are affecting our schools in terms of hairstyle. You see now the hairstyle policy have overtaken everything in terms of conditions in our schools, our engagement with teachers. I quite frankly see this as an opportunistic call that the minister is parading around the country, because I personally believe that a situation like this requires a technical understanding of the matter, and those technical people do their work, and the minister as a policy maker appreciate how then that is further taken to the next level, and not the minister operating like a social scientist going around to appreciate what is culturally acceptable or not.
As the minister is in campaign mode. They're not in seeing results and ensuring that the people under them, you know, are satisfied and they work conditions, and so no, they're in campaign mode at this time. And so for them, any little thing that seem to would want to attract and they feel as if, you know, they will get that audience, they will run with. I said to my fourth form students, boys and girls, we had a discussion, and that same here thing came up. And I asked them, how does one day coming to school with your hair anyhow empowers you, especially the females? How does that empower you as a young woman? How does it empower you?
So
go ahead.
Sorry to cut you, but that is just what we were waiting on. Miss McDonald again for the audience. Miss McDonald is going back.
Let us finally let her in.
Yeah, she's the incumbent going up back for general secretary post. But I want to take this same issue of the hairstyle as a policy that this government, through the ministry and the minister herself, is aggressively pursuing, as opposed to the policies that, as General Secretary Ms. McDonald, that were on the table, whether those were salaries, whether those were collective bargaining, that you find most important, as opposed to what we see as a very trivial, because this doesn't require the sort of effort the minister is putting into it, except, you know, I used to carry bald head. I see you got your natty. I know Miss Kissoon got her own style and the fro. So we are in a society where this doesn't become such an important matter as opposed to the bread and butter issues. But can you speak to those policies that are most pressing to the union at this moment and teachers?
Well, my brother Sharma, I want to say good night to you and thank you and Mark for having me here. And to my president, I salute you, my president in waiting, I salute you. And this here is, it's such a pleasure to be here, and more so, Sharma, to be in the presence of two powerful women. It says a lot about where our country is going to be heading in not so short, long time from now, as a matter of fact, where the education sector is going to be heading. But on this whole issue of hairstyles, I don't understand why we are paying all this emphasis, spending all this time, spending so much resource to have all these Zoom consultations to deal with hairstyles. I don't understand it. As a matter of fact, hairstyles were there ever since. As the person carrying dreads, if I'm going to work, then of course my dreads have got to be done in a particular way. I can't have it all scattered out. And those are basic rules that have been there, not written, but they're there. And so I don't know why we want to open a can of worms to decide how this must be done and that must be done, when as a matter of fact, we have much more pressing issues. We got issues of parents harassing teachers and assaulting them in school, and nobody doing anything about it. Nobody having consultations, not even the same Minister of Education holding consultations or have decided to hold consultations to talk about parents assaulting teachers, walking into schools and assaulting teachers. We have had instances where teachers have been robbed at gunpoint at schools. And you're not having those issues as front burner issues to deal with the safety of our teachers, safety of students in schools. Look, just about 2 weeks ago, we had police going into a school carrying a whole van load of some students. Ms. Kissoon could tell you that. Some students and some past students. A whole bunch of them they took to the station. Because you know what? They're at the back of the school compound and they're smoking marijuana, and who not smoking, they're rolling up and people bringing it to sell to the students. And these are pressing issues. Those are the things that we should be dealing with. Outside of that, we are faced with a pandemic. And I would have expected the Ministry of Education to go on a nationwide campaign. You recognize, I ain't touched salaries and so yet. To go on a nationwide campaign, educating teachers across this land, giving the kind of assistance to our pupils and students who would require internet services. I remember during the coalition's term in office, you had internet hubs where students could have gone to a community center or some safe place and have access to internet so that they can complete their assignments, they can be engaged. The PPP threw all of that out, and these are issues that the Minister of Education should be paying attention to, but no, she doesn't take time off to pay attention to that. She is up and in GTU's business, GTU's elections right now. That's one of her focus right now. She's up and in GTU's business. Every time I post something on Facebook, every time I post something on Facebook, she's up in that. So, you know, I don't know why she don't want to drink some water and mind her own business, but that's on the side. But the thing is, go ahead, Vanessa.
No, I was going to say also, apparently she's batting for somebody in the race.
Well, we all know the story. We all know the story, because I can tell you what, they've gone so far that they have now decided that I mean, I don't want to throw too much out here, but they are now infringing on people's democratic rights to where you want to associate and who you want to associate with and who you don't want to associate with. And they've gotten people to send motions into the GTU during which would be aired at our conference. But that's another story. We'll deal with those things, because I want people to understand that the Constitution of Guyana supersedes all other constitutions. Maybe lots of us don't know that. Even some who have professed to be politicians, they don't know that. And so they're coming up with foolishness. But the whole thing here, again, Sharma, is that there are so many other important issues that we need to fix. We got plenty children who are starving. We ain't taking time off to go look at them and to feed them, but we're taking time off to talk about hairstyles. Outside of that, we've got the teachers battling in schools. Teachers are suffering. Many of them are seconded to the departments of education because who in get throat issues, got kidney issues coming from the cheap chalk that they buy, and the chalk dust infecting, giving people all kind of ear infection and all kind of thing. Those are the issues that you're supposed to be battling with. We've got numbers of teachers who would have done sociology at the University of Guyana and social work. And you're not inclined to use these teachers to become counselors in schools, but you're talking about all kinds of craziness hairstyles. You've got teachers withering away in schools with the kind of salaries that we have. Thank God to the coalition government who saw it fit, even though we had to stand up and fight for it, who saw it fit to give teachers double increases in their double-digit increases in their salaries. That was the largest increase ever that teachers would have gotten. And I'm hoping that teachers are listening, they are watching, and they are reading between the lines what is happening. Because just the other day we got a imposed, is it an imposed 7% we got? And by the time they took out the taxes,
3.5 if you look at over a period of 2 years without considering inflation.
Yes.
Yeah.
What was looking after they would have taken out the taxes and so on, nobody thought about the high cost of living. And so you have teachers at this level with their salaries, but cost of living way past their heads. Nobody is talking about that, but we're holding consultation.
Well, the Minister of Labor is talking about it. In fact, he is saying to speak about salary increase is to be antiquated and to be out of touch with the new reality of what the union should
The
be
minister out of
representing.
touch.
Well,
The
Vanessa,
minister
you know, the thing is, Sharma, I don't expect to hear anything good coming from the Minister of Labor because he does not understand labor. Now, here is the Minister of Labor, and the teachers are having issues with the Ministry of Education, who's their employer. Their representative and their employer are in, let's say, on the battlefield at this time. As the Minister of Labor, your job is to mediate and not to take a side. But you notice what Joe Hamilton did? Joe Hamilton took a side, so he went on national television rather than calling these two entities together to say, hey, let's sit, let's see what is happening here. Rather than doing that, he took a position where he went on national television to threaten teachers, to tell them that they're going to lose pay if they don't go to work on the day that we call the day of reflection. And so he doesn't fit. I don't think we should be even listening to him. But I want to say, maybe, and this is without any form of disrespect, maybe he was liming at that place on Light Street for too long, or maybe he did not spend enough time there. So he has lost sight of the teachings of the late, great LFS Burnham. And Sharma, you would know that Burnham sheltered that guy, you know. Burnham sheltered him. The PNC covered him. But I think this is the right time now. This period for those of us who believe, who are Christians and believe that Jesus died for our atonements. And so I think this is the right time for him to go and offer some prayers and ask for forgiveness.
I think just the statements alone show that the minister indeed is out of touch. And all those ministers, because you spoke of both the education and the labor minister, and they show how out of touch they are in terms of the issues that are affecting, whether it's the distraction of the policy of hairstyle over the very important policies of collective bargaining and teachers and how teachers are treated, even coming out of, not even out of, but still within the COVID and the pandemic environment. And then you see the behavior of the Minister of Labor in terms of how he appreciates where unions are, not recognizing that politics and unionism in this part of the world have always intertwined and it's never been separated. In fact, unions birthed the political movement across this part of the world.
They don't
the minister many times go after unions because they have politicians in them. It is mind-boggling that even at that level, the minister doesn't know that. So the point that the minister is making, that to speak about salaries in this bread and butter, high cost living environment makes you antiquated. I mean, Ms. Kissoon, you must see this as a challenge to deal with, both of you.
Well, let me say to you, it's one of the issues that we have been dealing with over the years. It's an issue that we will continue to deal with because I can tell you, just like Ms. Kissoon, I, being a trade unionist, it wasn't a fly-by-night thing. I became a trade unionist because I recognized that at one point I had to represent myself. And that's where you find the passion coming out when I speak, because I understand what teachers go through, especially when they can't shout for themselves and they can't speak out loud for themselves. And that would have driven me to become a trade unionist. Many persons who stand out there and they talk all kinds of foolishness, let me say that, they don't understand what they're saying, because you know why? They got there just by a flight. So they've not experienced what it means to be a trade unionist. They don't feel how the ordinary worker out there feel. And that is why you see some of them could go out there and in Creolese terms, sell out their workers, because they don't understand what the ordinary man feels out there, or they don't understand what it is to be a trade unionist. But again, these issues are issues that we will continue to champion, and we will not stop until we get to where we ought to be.
Yeah.
So, and as we wrap up, Ms. Kissoon, I want to ask both of you, because that is really the point that we spoke on just now, Ms. McDonald, on how to touch, and even one can say very hypocritical, the Minister of Labour is when members of his own party sit in Parliament and are key figures in the trade union movement. That is the claim being made within the GTU, that the union, in fact, the Minister of Education made that very open statement, is closely or too closely connected with politics. In your closing remarks, and as you encourage people to pay attention to the outcome of Saturday, how do you respond to that? First, Ms. McDonald, and then we'll close with Ms. Kissoon.
You know, like you said, a people, a man, a woman who doesn't know their history, they are condemned to make mistakes and condemned to be a failure. You said it earlier. The trade unions would have birthed national politics. And if you look at many of our leaders, our national leaders, they came out of the trade unions. Where did Chedi Jagan come from? He came from a trade union. Where did LFS Burnham come from? He came out of a trade union. We had Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow who stood there. And these are the things that people have got to understand. When you don't know, you must shut up. But in all of this, when we look at what is happening over the years, from since I was probably a teenager, the late Komal Chan stood there as a parliamentarian.
Mm-hmm.
He sat there as a government MP, as president of GAU, as president one time of FITUG, until his death. The new president, Paul Narayan, he is now a parliamentarian and he's president of of GAU. And I think he's the treasurer of FITUG. There's no problem with that, because you know why? These are the people who are closely aligned with the PPP, and so on many occasions they're going to sing the songs that the PPP want them to sing. But you know what? Coretta McDonald learned in church that if you want to lead out, you have to be a soloist. And if you want to have blended voices, then you have to be in a choir. And you have to be a team. And so on the issue of human rights and injustices and equal opportunities, I have decided that I will stand out and speak. And I've got company to join me, my sister right here. And these are the issues and these are the traits that they cannot deal with. As a matter of fact, I think it's either Denzel Washington or former President Obama said, the very thought of you being there, something to that effect, irritates the demons in them. So they can't deal with a Coretta McDonald. So you're throwing up all kinds of shades. Oh, Coretta McDonald too politicized. Oh, Coretta McDonald too this. But you know what? These very hypocrites, in 2018, Coretta McDonald was a champion. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Check, go on the internet, go on YouTube, you'll see it. Barra Jagdeo, the VP now, hailed Coretta McDonald as a champion when we had industrial action in 2018. Priya Manik Chan did the same thing. The CEO at Gaisuko and many others saw Coretta McDonald as a champion. But in 2021, when I'm standing to fight the very same issues, I'm political. But that's okay. I will continue to be me. I will continue to fight for the small man out there, the ordinary people out there, because I recognize that the PPP government is not a government for the ordinary man. They are a government for the elites. And I'm not going to spend much more time on them. But I want our teachers who are listening right now to pay attention to what is happening to leading up to Saturday's count at GTU. I know there are several schools who have complained that they have not received their ballots. I'm hoping that between now and the time of counting, that the elections office is going to find some way of getting those ballots to those people that they can vote and return those ballots. Complaints have been sent to them, to the monitors. Complaints have been, because I would have shared the elections officers' numbers with teachers. Imagine the Government Technical Institute, which is kind of obliquely opposite the GTU. They have not received their ballots. And I find that as being very alarming. But let's watch, keep a close eye on what is happening there. And we are going to take it from there. We're going to take it from there. But let's be good Guyanese citizens. Teachers, you know that you have true representation when you hear the names Coretta McDonald, Vanessa Kissoon, Lesmine Collins, Jennifer Clark Nicholson. You know that is true representation. And so we are going to work with you, for you, and together we will stand side by side with each other. Let's be good Guyanese, and let's remember we're one people, one nation, with one destiny, coupled with the motto of the GTU, which says, we are molders of the nation.
Ms. Kissoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solomon. Ms. McDonald, I want to join with you with what you said, and especially as reminding or quoting what Mr. Solomon said about trade union birth in the politics. You see, the PPP, when something, as you said earlier, is working in their favor, it's not a problem. But once there's opposition, and once they see persons who can stand up for their rights, you know, they're bullies. And they believe that whenever they come, you must step back. So once you are out there and you represent it, they will find every reason to turn, whether it's teachers' minds, the people within the community. So they're going to say, oh, Kissoon and McDonald are political. We're all political. All of us are aligned to some political party. The minister is political and she's the Minister of Education. So what are we should say to our teachers? Do not listen to the minister. She's political. Isn't she a political figure? We're all political. Politics is all around us. Some of us politics in our homes, but they come with this type of distraction, especially when they know the people that are coming are people with strong voices, people who speak truth to power, people who can represent, people who will be able to hold them accountable. And so in order to have passive leaders and leaders who will secretly align with their agenda, they will come forward and say, because you notice, they only say things about Coretta McDonald and Vanessa Kissoon. You don't hear them saying other persons in the executive or other members are political, because you know what? They see opposition. They know what they see. And when they see that, because they know to themselves or they come over, they believe they're bullies. And when you know, we got to say what I say go, they know that when it comes to Coretta McDonald and Vanessa Kissoon, it ain't going to be like that. It's not going to be like
We're
that.
not up for sale. We're not up for sale. We can't be bought. We can't be bought.
And so they will use anything to distract our teachers, to distract this process, this election process. But I want to say to our teachers, we are the educators. In fact, we have them where they are. Isn't that so? It's teachers that have them where they are. It is us, the educators. And so let us not have them come now to believe that they can twist us or twist our work, twist our mind. They're not capable of doing that because we're smart people. We are teachers. We mold this nation. We mold the generations. All right? Every profession comes out of teachers. We're the ones that brought them up, whether it's from nursery to university. So I want to say tonight, let us not be distracted. That's all the PPP does, you know. When they know they see opposition, they come with all sorts of things to distract you. So what they do, they come with hairstyle. It's a big issue. Yes, we have some students who experience hairstyle issues or whatever. That can be dealt with. But don't come with it as if it's a big crisis when we have violence among our students on the increase. We see what is happening when we have in our classrooms. I'm there. Mr. Solomon could tell you there many times he calls. Sometimes we have things to discuss. I'm there working with students. We have children who are suicidal. The minister needs to go and sit in classroom. She needs to go and spend some time in the classroom maybe, and then she'll understand. And then they will understand it's not being political. You understand? And we will continue. And like I said earlier, our motto, Mr. Solomon, our motto is we don't lose. Either we win or we learn. And so tonight I want to say to our colleagues, and I want to with Miss McDonald, as she said, we're going to represent you. In us, you will have leaders that will stand up with you and that will stand up for you. In us, you will have leaders that will fight with you and that will fight for you. In us, you will have leaders that will work with you and will work for you. Together, we will move the Guyana Teachers Union forward and give teachers and students and the education fraternity the type of representation it deserves. Thank you.
Ladies,
Sharma, just before you close, I want to, on
no
behalf
problem.
of us, to extend our heartfelt sympathy to the immediate family and the school family of Miss Shanice Walks, who
Yes.
lost her life senselessly.
19
And
years.
these are the things that the minister should be shouting about. Another teacher, 19 years old, who would have lost her life. I trust that you're going to find comfort in the pleasant memories you have of her, and that God will give you folks the strength to go on. From
Thank you.
us to you, the teaching fraternity mourns at this time.
Thank you, ladies. I wish you both best wishes. I wish you the success, in fact, at your quest to become president and general secretary, re-elected as general secretary. I know both of you. I've worked closely with both of you, and I understand the passion that not only you have as advocates, but in particular advocates for the rights and representation for our teachers. As I too earlier expressed to those women, including the young teacher that lost her life, let me also say, as a member of the People's National Congress, and both of you are also, to take this time to express our sympathies on the passing of Miss Janet Obamala,
Yeah,
and
oh my,
to
so
our
sad.
family and friends, we express our sincere condolences, and we want you to know that our thoughts and our prayers are with you all at this moment. And the party would have indeed lost a very young, brilliant, aggressive, uh,
Vibrant. Mhm.
very vibrant advocate, and we
Very
hope that
loyal
we
one
can,
too.
very loud,
Yes,
that we can
very
find peace.
loyal.
So again, let me take this time to thank you all for being with us this evening. I know our
Thank you for
issue.
having us.
Yes, we spoke on this is our holiday moment. I know we have our Easter period. To my Christian brothers and sisters again, observe the moment well. To my Muslim brothers and sisters, as you enter your Juma and you're part of your Ramadan fasting, may Almighty Allah accept your sincerest intentions. And on the issues we cover this evening on our treatment towards our women folk, I hope that the conversation continues so that we know that this is in itself a pandemic. We're losing lives to the COVID-19. We see we're losing lives to domestic violence, that we must keep in our conversations so that we can treat with this at the level of our policymakers right down into our society. And let us pay attention to how we see our immigration policies and how the government is approaching in a very piecemeal manner immigration that is bringing criminality, but at the same time is allowing for a sort of social engineering by the People's Progressive Party in building constituencies. We see the issues with ID card. And now that we have two new parliamentarians, this evening we want to again express congratulations to Mr. Aubrey Norton on being elected as the new leader of the opposition, and Ms. Valda Lawrence on returning to Parliament. And we hope to see a more aggressive Parliament and a confrontation on the issues that are affecting Guyanese. We already saw the People's Progressive Party taking away the public accounts power by reducing what becomes a quorum. So again, thank you for having us, and may Almighty God, yes, Ms. Kissoon.
Ma'am, just to say, Mr. Solomon and Ms. McDonald, just to encourage our kite flyers to fly their kites away from electrical wires. And parents, please, you know, especially with the little ones, let us guide them and be there with them as we enjoy the Easter Monday, Easter Sunday, and all the activities. To all our drivers, please, I understand there's so much happening this weekend. The big, what's it? The big show is, I don't know. Next to that, you guys would know that more than me. But let us not drink and drive. To my young people, you know, let us be safe on the roads. And to us, those of us who will be at home, who will be wherever in our rooms, praying in our, you know, our little rooms and so on, let us pray for the safety of our young people, our children, because we know at this time what happens. We know how the enemy tries to slip in. So covering them and ensuring that, you know, let us not fly our kites around electrical wires, and because we don't want to hear of any tragedies at this time.
Thank you very much again, ladies, and good night. Blessings to you all. And
thank you, Lennon. Thank you, Lennon, for extending the time.
Good.
Thanks to Lennon.
Blessings, ladies. Enjoy.
So, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
Well, the gas raise up and the grocery raise up. I think the government could do something about that. Because people taking a raise up top dog, you don't know. That all what I have to say. They should really do something about that. Well, the gas raise up and the grocery raise up. I think the government could do something about that. Because people taking a raise up top dog, you don't know. That all what I have to say. They should really do something about that.
Right about now, I'm living in Guyana right about now. I am in Guyana no more. I think I will go and get me visa and I go fly out and I go to Burmese and I go relax myself because I am in Guyana no more. I am in Guyana. I gotta go Burmese. I fly now go Burmese. Things cheap there.